Mr. Trump faces the problem that he took a lot of documents home with him from the White House, which is not in itself unusual. What is unusual is that when he was expected to audit those documents and send them back, he appears to have consciously chosen to keep back certain materials. And even after the Justice Department had come at him with, let's say, polite but increasingly firm requests. The Presidential Records Act, which was established in the late 70s after the experiences with Watergate and with President Nixon's papers, have put some pretty serious restrictions on what papers a former president is allowed to simply keep under his own authority. Instead, papers are supposed to be held by the National Archives. And this is generally true, and it's especially true of documents that are marked as classified at whatever level they are classified. And so what seems to be the problem here is President Trump adopted the position that these are all my papers and I shall do with them what I want, which one can assert such things, but one has to make sure that one's actually following the law as it's written. And that's where he runs into the problem today. And it didn't have to get to this point, I would say. It's not simply the removal, the sort of the taking of the papers home is not the problem. The problem is him spending the past couple of years essentially avoiding returning them. And even having his lawyers say that he had returned them when it turned out that he had not. And that's where the trouble has emerged.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, there's a lot of anger over these charges. A lot of people saying it's all being politically motivated. Whether that's true or not, it's not for us to say. But what is happening in terms of if this is going to go to court in May, how does that affect the timings of the presidential election?
Well, this is the interesting challenge. Is there is no rule that says that a person who is facing any sort of charges can't run for president. And so one of the big questions was his lawyers had tried to convince Judge Cannon down in Florida, who's going to be hearing this case, had tried to convince her to put the whole thing off until after January 2025. So in other words, after the election. But the Justice Department's position had been, well, if we don't want this to get in the way of the election, we should do it sooner. So we should do it as early as this fall. And so in a sense, the judge split the difference by saying, the trial will begin in May. And it's going to be quite ticklish, because that means that throughout the campaign, Mr. Trump will have to deal with questions about these charges. May will be after most of the Republican primaries. So we may indeed face the prospect that he would be going to trial at a time when he perhaps had already locked up the nomination of the Republican Party. And we are in uncharted waters, let's say, here in the United States with this particular problem. Although I would say that with Donald Trump, we've been in uncharted waters for quite some time.
Fair point.
And how will these court cases actually affect Donald Trump's campaign, do you think? Because we've seen before, actually, that it does almost support his case. It feeds into his narrative, doesn't it, of him being this outlier and it's him against the establishment. And it doesn't do anything to deter his supporters, it seems.
Apparently it does not. I mean, in a certain sense, Mr. Trump has taken the bring it on mentality here, is that the more these things come up, in fact, he has even leaked information that he was about to be indicted for this or that activity. And so he's using it as a way to burnish his standing as an outsider. What's especially interesting is you would think that people who would want to defeat Donald Trump for the Republican nomination might want to use the fact that he is under criminal indictment against him. But very few of his Republican opponents have been willing or able to do that because they're so afraid of losing the support of the, let's say, the party base, which in a sense makes it a little easier for Mr. Trump, because he can talk about himself as a victim of these crimes, and he has his own, the people who are supposed to be his rivals are essentially reinforcing his message. So it's once again, it is a very unusual circumstance. It's hard to imagine any other circumstance where, in a competitive election, that someone would not use the fact that their rival was under criminal indictment as a negative, but instead they're not, and so that helps Mr. Trump. And so I think I don't make a lot of predictions, but I would say that it's very likely that come May, he may still indeed be the front runner for the nomination. He might even have locked up a great number of the delegates, and then he's going to go on trial. And then we're really here in this country going to have to ask some difficult questions about the political future of not only of Donald Trump, but of the United States.